Have you ever watched an argument unfold where two people are using the exact same vocabulary, but they're clearly speaking entirely different languages?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's like a slow motion collision of communication.
Right. It's like one person is trying to describe the emotional reality of a relationship, and the other person is aggressively quoting the literal terms of their apartment lease.
Yeah, they aren't just missing each other. They're using completely different tools to measure reality.
Exactly. And as an observer, you can see the confusion very quickly calcifying into absolute rage. Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are so thrilled you're here with us.
We really are.
Because today, we are unpacking what might be one of the most intense, rapidly escalating communication breakdowns in recorded history. Our source material is a single, incredibly dense excerpt from the Gospel of John.
Specifically, it's chapter 8, verses 51 through 59.
Right. And this text is actually set as the reading for Thursday of the 5th week of Lent, which falls on March 26, 2026. Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to trace how a seemingly quiet conversation about keeping a promise completely spirals into a life-or-death confrontation in a matter of minutes.
To really grasp the velocity of this breakdown, we have to start by grounding ourselves in the physical space where this is happening. The text places this confrontation inside the temple in Jerusalem.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, and earlier in the chapter, John specifies that Jesus is speaking in the treasury. So this isn't some serene pastoral setting on a grassy hillside.
Right, it's not a quiet Bible study.
Not at all. The treasury was located in the Court of the Women, which was like one of the most heavily trafficked, bustling, and public areas of the entire temple complex.
Oh, wow. So you have to picture massive stone colonnades, the echoing sounds of coins being dropped into the collection receptacles, the heavy scent of incense. Wait, I shouldn't say ... Just picture a massive crowd of pilgrims, scholars, and religious authorities.
Exactly. It is the absolute epicenter of religious and political power in the ancient Jewish world. So the air in this hymn is already thick with tension.
I can imagine.
And when you read the pacing of the dialogue we're about to analyze, you notice it moves at a breakneck speed. The phrasing is short, sharp, and highly combative.
Breaking down the specific wording here, the literal choices of verbs and tenses reveals exactly why the tension in this sacred courtyard suddenly boils over.
And we begin exactly where the source text begins, with a bold, seemingly impossible promise that ignites the entire conflict.
Right, Jesus opens this exchange with a statement that just immediately sucks all the air out of the room. He says, and I'm quoting the text here, "Truly, truly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death."
Just pause and imagine you are standing in that crowded, tense public square hearing that.
It's wild.
It is an absolute never see death, and the crowd's reaction is instantaneous and visceral.
They don't politely disagree, do they?
No, they don't stroke their beards and say, well, let us debate this theological nuance. They declare flat out, now we know that you have a demon.
Which, honestly, if you are listening to this and putting yourself in the shoes of that crowd, it's actually incredibly easy to understand their reaction. Wouldn't you react the exact same way?
I mean, probably, yeah.
It's like someone walking into a modern medical or scientific conference and claiming to have a simple formula for literal immortality. The crowd naturally points to historical facts. They say, Abraham died. The prophets died.
Right.
From a purely empirical perspective, isn't Jesus the one acting completely irrational here?
Well, what's fascinating here is that empirical framework is exactly what traps them. The original Greek text reveals the precise mechanical failure in their communication.
Oh, interesting. How so?
So when Jesus makes his promise, he says that whoever keeps his word will never see death. The Greek verb he uses there is therio. It means to observe, to perceive, to look at something with spiritual or mental understanding.
Like where we get the word theory, right? Or theater.
Exactly. But listen to how the crowd repeats his claim back to him. They paraphrase it. They accuse him of saying that anyone who keeps his word will never taste death. The verb they use is giomai.
Wait, taste death? That is a significantly different sensory experience than seeing death.
It really is. It changes the entire physical reality of the sentence. Seeing or perceiving death can be observational, right? It can refer to a spiritual state or an eternal perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But tasting death, that is a deeply intimate, unavoidable, visceral experience. You cannot untaste a bitter meal. It implies the biological reality of dying, like the failing of the body.
Ah, I see.
And the slight shift in the text perfectly underscores the total breakdown. Jesus is speaking about a spiritual, eternal reality, a state of being beyond the physical.
While the crowd drags the metaphor right back down into the dirt, into the literal physical reality of human biology and graves.
Exactly. And because they are entirely focused on the literal grave, they interpret this promise of immortality as an arrogant, impossible biological boast.
Which naturally means their next move is to demand to know where he gets the authority to make such an outrageous claim. The debate shifts from the promise to the promiser.
Yes, they ask a very pointed question. Are you greater than our father Abraham, who died, and the prophets died? Who do you make yourself out to be?
It's the ultimate question of ancient authority, isn't it?
It really is. And to understand it, we have to look at the mechanics of the first century Mediterranean honor-shame culture. In our modern world, we tend to think of honor or reputation as an infinite resource.
Right, like you can be famous, I can be famous, there's enough attention to go around.
Exactly. But in their culture, honor was a zero-sum game. It was a limited commodity, like gold or land. If you claim honor for yourself, you are seen as stealing it from someone else. You didn't invent authority, it was granted to you by your lineage or an institution.
So when they say, who do you make yourself out to be, they are accusing him of stealing honor.
Precisely. Which makes Jesus' response incredibly strategic. He refuses to directly self-promote. He says, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing.
He uses a cultural loophole. He explicitly rejects self-glorification, which aligns with their cultural rules of humility. But then he immediately attributes his glory to his Father, whom he notes the crowd claims as our God.
Yes, he's basically saying, I'm not stealing honor. The highest possible authority in the universe is freely granting it to me.
I do have to push back on the strategy here, though. He doesn't just calmly answer their question with that loophole and leave it at that. He actively goes on the offensive.
He definitely does.
I mean, he tells this crowd of devout religious scholars standing in their own temple that they do not actually know their own God. And he goes even further, saying if he agreed with them, he'd be a liar like them. Isn't this intentionally pouring gasoline on the fire?
It absolutely looks like pouring gasoline to us, yeah. But if we look at the theological mechanics of what he's doing, it's actually a necessary unmasking.
What do you mean by unmasking?
Well, Jesus isn't just throwing out insults. He's systematically dismantling their theological monopoly. These are people whose entire identity, their social standing, their political power is wrapped up in being the exclusive keepers of the law.
Right, and being the descendants of Abraham.
Exactly. If Jesus is going to introduce a totally new, transcendent spiritual reality, he can't just lay it neatly on top of their existing worldview. He has to shatter their false sense of security first.
So by drawing a sharp line and claiming exclusive knowledge of the divine, he's forcing them to realize that their entire religious foundation might be hollow.
Yes, and because he has just dismantled their claim to God, he then replaces it with his own claim to the very patriarch they just tried to use against him.
It's a masterful rhetorical pivot. They use Abraham as their trump card to prove everyone dies.
Yeah.
So what does Jesus say? He says, your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad.
The audacity of that statement is staggering when you consider the context. He's standing in front of the most educated religious minds of his day and essentially claims to be the cosmic fulfillment of everything their founding father hoped for.
Right, that Abraham, across centuries of time, somehow witnessed this exact moment.
Mm-hmm.
And the crowd's response shows they are still trapped in that literal mindset.
Yeah.
You can almost hear the gears grinding to a halt in their heads.
Completely.
They reply, you are not yet 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham? They are completely baffled by the timeline. So what does this all mean?
Well, if we connect this to...
Looks like a young 30-something startup founder telling a room full of historians that they personally collaborated with George Washington, right?
That's a great analogy. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that specific detail, not yet 50 years old, is an incredibly telling metric.
Why 50, specifically?
In ancient Jewish culture, and specifically within the bureaucratic framework of the religious laws found in the Book of Numbers, 50 was the age of full maturity. It was the mandated retirement age for Levites from their heavy service in the temple.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, reaching 50 was the undeniable marker of being a senior statesman, a fully established, venerable adult. The crowd is looking at a man who hasn't even reached the standard bureaucratic milestone of ordinary human aging.
To them, he hasn't even earned his senior stripes yet. And he's claiming to have interacted with a figure who lived nearly 2 millennia earlier.
Exactly.
We do this all the time, don't we? We try to measure profound, abstract truths using literal administrative metrics. They're entirely anchored to chronological time and human biology.
But that physical challenge about his age actually traps the crowd. By demanding a chronological answer, they force Jesus into a response that shatters the concept of chronology altogether.
Which brings us to the climax of the text. He delivers what is arguably the most famous line of this entire exchange. Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am.
It is the absolute pinnacle of the confrontation. Everything, the debate about death, the argument over authority, the confusion over timelines, has been building to the structural collapse of this specific sentence.
Here is where it gets really interesting on a purely linguistic level. Grammatically, this sentence is a mess.
It really is.
I mean, if you're trying to prove you're older than someone, you use the past tense. You say, before Abraham was, I was. What is the strategic purpose of slamming a past tense and a present tense together like that?
Well, it breaks the rules of language because he is claiming a reality that breaks the rules of time. By using the present tense I am, in contrast to Abraham's past tense was, Jesus removes himself from the chronological timeline entirely.
So he isn't saying he is historically older than Abraham?
No, he's claiming to exist in a perpetual, eternal present. But the grammatical paradox is only half the explosive payload of that sentence. The far more dangerous element is the specific Greek phrase he uses, ego eimi, I am.
Which carries massive weight for this specific audience.
Exactly. To this crowd, I am isn't just a pronoun and a verb. It is the divine name. It is the exact translation of the name God gave to Moses at the burning bush in the book of Exodus when God said, I am, W-H-O, I am.
Oh, wow. So Jesus is taking the sacred, unutterable name of the creator of the universe and applying it to himself in the middle of the temple treasury.
To the crowd, this wasn't just a philosophical riddle or poor grammar. It was explicit, undeniable blasphemy.
And their reaction proves exactly how they interpreted it. They don't ask another question. They don't try to debate his grammar. The text says, so they picked up stones to throw at him.
The debate is instantly over.
But let's dig into the mechanism of that violence. Why stoning? Why not call the temple guards or arrest him? It feels like a sudden mob riot.
It looks like a riot to modernize, but in their cultural and legal framework, it was a judicial duty. Under Levitical law, specifically Leviticus 24, blaspheming the name of God wasn't just offensive, it was a capital crime.
A crime that legally required immediate execution, right?
Yes, by stoning.
Yeah.
And it had to be carried out by the community. When Jesus uttered, I am, the crowd didn't just lose their tempers. In their minds, a legal tripwire had been crossed. The stones were the prescribed, legal, religious mechanism for dealing with what they perceived as a cosmic crime.
So they believed they were executing a holy duty right there in the courtyard.
Exactly.
It's a sudden, violent resolution to a dialogue that started with the promise of immortality. And the text gives us this abrupt, almost cinematic ending to the scene. The stones are literally in their hands. The violence is about to erupt. But Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple.
The scene just snaps to black. The tension is left entirely unresolved.
Hanging in the heavy air of the treasury. A theological conversation literally ends in attempted murder.
It really is a breathless sequence. If we pull ourselves back to the surface for a moment and synthesize what we've just witnessed, the trajectory is astonishing.
In a matter of minutes, a single conversation inside a crowded temple spiraled from a profound promise about keeping a word into a cultural debate about authority and honor.
Then into a paradox about historical timelines, and finally into a life-or-death confrontation over identity and the legal definition of blasphemy.
And what's fascinating is how easy it is to lose sight of the catalyst.
This raises an important question, doesn't it? When you look at the absolute chaos of the ending, the stones, the threat of death, you have to remember how it started. At the very center of this explosive argument was Jesus' initial condition, if anyone keeps my word.
Yeah. The entire violent confrontation started because Jesus claimed that the simple act of keeping a word is a force powerful enough to conquer death itself.
It is a staggering concept, especially when contrasted with the heavy physical stones the crowd resorts to. The text presents holding on to a simple word as a stronger, more enduring force than human mortality, stronger than time, and ultimately even stronger than the physical violence of the crowd.
It's profound. And here is something we didn't touch on during the breakdown, but it's a final lingering thought based purely on the text. When Jesus slipped away and left the temple, the crowd was left standing there, literally holding the rocks.
Right.
In their minds, they successfully defended their literal physical space. They upheld their legal codes and their chronological timelines. But in winning that physical argument, they completely lost the transcendent metaphysical revelation that was standing right in front of them.
Wow.
As you go about your day-to-day, ask yourself, how often do we win an argument by aggressively clinging to our literal rules, our technicalities, and our metrics, only to realize we've completely missed the deeper truth? How often are we left standing in the courtyard, holding a pile of rocks, while the reality we were looking for slips quietly out the door? Keep diving deep.